Welcome back to Veronica Live, and we're here with Steve Goreham. He is the Executive Director of the Climate Science Coalition of America and the author of 4 books, and our favorite book ever for talking about energy and greenness is The Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. And, you know, John and I read that book last year, Steve, and that was like one of my top Veronica picks for 2023 because it was outstanding and you really, you know, talk about the renewable energy and make it so people that don't understand this concept, we can finally understand it. So welcome back, Steve, to Veronica Live.
Great. Great to join you, Veronica. Thanks for the kind words. And John, good to be back.
Well, the number one thing that John and I need to talk to you about is Secretary Buttigieg came out this week talking about how we're going to be EV-centric by 2030 and that we are not with the program because we're fighting him and it's all about, you know, we're people from the 1990s stuck to our landlines. So I wanted to talk to you about that, Steve, because 2030 is right around the corner. Is he on crack with this?
Well, no, I think he's a little bit off. We're actually EVs have been penetrating world markets and the U.S. for a number of years, but they hit a speed bump last year. And just this first quarter, the figures are out, and they actually lost share of the U.S. Light vehicle market. They only grew about 2%, and the market grew a little bit more. Fourth quarter last year, EV sales actually declined in California, declined in Germany, first time ever. Ford Motor lost $4.7 billion last year on their EV business, and that was about $65,000 per vehicle in the for the year. And so they've kind of hit a bit of a speed bump, and the issues with EVs are starting to pile up.
Well, isn't one of the issues that to buy a Ford Lightning, it's like $100K? Your pocketbook can't handle it, Steve.
Yeah, they're very high. I think the cheapest models are 50, 60, but yeah, the more expensive models are close to $100K. And so cost is a big deal, but there's a bunch of other problems too. The insurance is another big cost. It's about 70% higher in the U.S. now to insure an electric vehicle versus a gasoline car. And in England, very tough to get insurance right now. I think, and if you do, you pay about £5,000 annually to insure your electric vehicle. Very, very high. And a problem is with if you get into a minor collision and you touch the battery in any way, they may have to replace the whole battery, which can cost up to $20,000 or so. So that's a big issue.
That is one of the other things is, you know, out of California is they're basically mandating electric semi trucks, you know, the class 8 type trucks.
Oh yeah.
And you know, one of the things I was laughing at, you know, I read I think it was Wall Street Journal about 2 months ago, had a story of a driver that took from the port, you know, took containers from the port and took them inland for delivery. And They were describing his day, you know, and the amount of time that he wasted at charging stations was astonishing. And his productivity was probably about a quarter of what it would have been with a diesel. But one of the things you know, we talked last time we had you on, you know, we were talking about the national worldwide energy demand and converting to renewables and everything. And one of the things I came across was the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I didn't know we had such a thing, but apparently we do.
Yeah.
They came out with a study in December that said that we would need 504 terawatts per year just to charge these electric trucks. And I'm like, and you know, and they're talking about like 1 megawatt charging stations. And I'm like, Do you know what 1 megawatt power to a business takes to get put in? And I'm like, you want to put a bunch of charging stations in that are 1 megawatt plus? I mean, is anybody rational about this stuff?
Well, and that's my question:
No,
is can our grid handle this, Steve?
No, I mean, there's a million issues with these trucks, and they're in some sort of fantasy land. Both the state of California, which passed the advanced clean fleets regulation. As of January 1st, all new, basically heavy trucks have to be zero emissions vehicles. And then we just had the federal government come out with phase 3, the EPA, for regulations for heavy trucks, and they want everybody to go to heavy trucks too. And you're right, it's just crazy. In California, they set up the first charging station basically for heavy trucks in the nation with a whole pile of California money. They've got like 24 or 28 outlets. And if they put a truck on each one of those and charge them, they would use as much electricity as San Bernardino. A city of 200,000 people is the amount of electricity you would need to charge these things. This just isn't going to happen. This is beyond anything that is sensible in any way. There was just an article about a guy who's a truck manufacturer. He said, if you gave me one of these trucks, I wouldn't use it because it's got so much weight and I would lose payload, and I have to spend hours to charge it. And there are no charging stations around the country. Many folks have pointed out that we need 2 or 3 times as many trucks on the road if we went. So how is that going to be environmentally friendly? Let's double the number of trucks on the road, which are electrics, to get rid of the diesel trucks. But this is fantasy land. These people are not. There's no reality entering in this argument about electric transportation.
Well, so is it like our washing machines and dishwashers and stuff, where the government passes some stupid regulation that says, you can only use 2 gallons of water, to wash your dishes in the dishwasher, and if they don't get clean, who cares? That's your problem, not ours. We're gonna be environmentally friendly. Is that the whole objective? It's just it's the show and not and the consequences be damned.
Yeah, and then but this is just this truck thing is so far out of whack, it's crazy. So the advanced clean fleets in California, as of January of this year, although they're trying to relax it a little because nobody can do it, but you mentioned those trucks that take the freight from the ports to the railheads. Those are called drayage trucks. They have to be zero emissions. All major truck fleets, all the big companies, if they register any new truck, it's got to be zero emissions. They have to reduce their percentage of fleets that are diesel. And by the way, so this isn't going to happen. We have 19 states now that are suing the EPA because the EPA has granted a waiver to California to put in these regs. We're going to have major suits over the EPA phase 3 stuff as well. But some of these disadvantages are huge. So the range on an electric truck is about 250 to 300 miles. The range on a diesel truck is 1,500 miles. You can refuel a diesel truck in 15 minutes, but it takes hours to charge an electric truck. Electric trucks have about 10,000 pounds more weight, and so that comes out of the freight you can carry. They cost 2 to 3 times as much for an electric as a diesel heavy truck. And as I mentioned, there are no chargers anywhere. Again, another story, somebody wanted to set up a charging station near Joliet, Interstate Route 80. And they went to the city and said, we want to do this. And he said, well, you're going to use more electricity than the entire city of Joliet. I mean, how could we possibly do this? So people have just gone off the deep end with this. This is beyond any kind of reality, and it's all going to come crashing down, which is one of the things I talk about in Green Breakdown.
Well, the breaking story, sorry, John, the breaking story this morning, Steve, is wearing jeans is bad for the earth. And apparently wearing a pair of jeans is like driving 6 miles with the carbon footprint. And I'm going, first it was my pizza oven, and now they're going after an American staple, the blue jeans. It's just out of control, honestly.
Now it's jeans, right? I saw another article saying that it was computing how much greenhouse gases people use to go visit Yellowstone, and thought it was so terrible people were driving to Yellowstone. Last month, the World Health Organization proposed a global ban on consumption of meat and dairy products. I'm like, what planet are you living on? And then the United Nations, of course, wants everybody to eat insects because they, quote, emit less greenhouse gases and less ammonia than cattle or pigs. They require significantly less land or water than cattle rearing. This stuff is just crazy, and you got to wonder. You got to wonder where the elites, the United Nations and elites of this world come from, but they are far beyond anything which is rational at this point.
I'm just wondering what the psychological basis is. I mean, you take people that would, I gather they're all political actors. Okay, so you have to look at it in that lens. But even political actors have rational thought processes occasionally, and it's like you've taken the extreme green people who think that people are the enemy of the earth, that the earth would be a whole lot better if we eliminated the human population. Mother Earth would be really wonderful. But what's causing them to do this? I mean, you can give them the numbers, and as you pointed out, like net zero is a fantasy. It's a great talking point, but it's a fantasy, as far as reality and life goes. And what is it? Where's this disconnect happening at?
Yeah, it's been kind of a long history. So just a little bit of history. So in the 1970s, a bunch of computer modelers started building climate models, and some scientists noticed that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was rising slowly. It had gone in the 50s from about 315 parts per million. Now, today, it's up over 420 parts per million. It was rising, but people should know this is about 4 molecules in every 10,000 in the atmosphere. It's very, very small, and the amount that we could have put up there in history is only a fraction of one of those 4 molecules. But they developed these computer modelers, and then we had a guy by the name of Dr. James Hansen, who was at NASA, who testified in front of Congress in 1988 and said that he thought he was 99% sure that the global temperatures are rising and people were causing it. That's what his computer modelers showed. And then we had the United Nations that set up the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who within 1 year found that humans were causing dangerous global warming. And then in 1993, we had the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, and 40 nations in the European Union signed up to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It was a pretty quick process. Now, the United Nations, for many decades, has had 3 major goals that they've announced. One is to become an environmental leader, and they've used the climate scare to do that. Second, they want to set up a world government. And the first climate conferences, President Jacques Chirac of France said these were the first example of global government. And then they want to redistribute wealth from the United States and Europe, the wealthy nations, to the poor nations of the world. And they've been using the climate scare to do that. We're supposed to send these climate funds. Matter of fact, India is asked for the small sum of $1 trillion a year to get to net zero by 2070. Nobody's doing that, but so this thing has grown and grown, but now it's gotten all out of hand. It's become the center for every environmental group, the reason for their existence. Of course, we have wind and solar and biofuel industries. We have deans of sustainability at colleges, vice presidents of sustainability at companies. We have thousands of consultants that help companies become green. It's just become a massive industry. Nevertheless, if you look at the evidence closely, it shows that global warming is dominated by nature, not what people are doing. Nevertheless, we're in the midst of the biggest superstition in modern history, the fear that this trace gas is causing dangerous warming. It is remarkable. We live in strange times.
Well, I was going to ask you about climate change, and because people say that it causes inflation. Because of course the Biden administration wants to blame everything but themselves on the cause of inflation. So why do people say that, Steve? That climate change is causing inflation?
Well, I don't know. They probably got a government contract to do this study, but this was published in Communications, Earth and Environment. Just back in March, and basically this was the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact in Europe, and they said that we're going to have food inflation of 3% per year for the next decade. They call it climateflation. But this isn't really supported by any kind of evidence. If you look at history, 1960 to today, the world production of corn, rice, and wheat has increased by a factor of 5. Our farmers are terribly productive nowadays. They're using less land, producing huge amounts of output. And if you look at the real price of all these things, they've gone down less than inflation over the last 50 or 60 years. So this is another projection that isn't based on any kind of reality. But if it's inflation, if it's weather, if it's the food you eat, if it's anything you do, your blue jeans, it's got to be a problem with the climate. And this is just another one of those studies.
Well, I wanted to ask you, John and I talked about this. Mitch McConnell's sister-in-law had a terrible EV accident. She was drinking, and it's come out that she was very drunk. But the vehicle, her Tesla, ended up in a pond, and she ended up drowning. Yep. And when the rescue people showed up, they were afraid to do anything with the vehicle. They were afraid they were going to get shocked, and there was just so many concerns. So I don't think we're ready on any level to go full EV by 2030 when we don't even, and John and I have talked about this with you before, when we had Hurricane Michael here, people that didn't drive their Teslas away, like they caught on fire and they couldn't get the fire to stop with the batteries.
And burn their house down, because it was in the garage.
So we're so not ready.
There's a big problem. Yeah, and it just shouldn't be forced on people. The problem with all this is that the government wants to force everybody to do it because they think if everybody drives an EV, we're going to stop the oceans from rising. That is the definition of modern superstition. But you're right. We still have a self-ignition problem with cars, and because of the lithium batteries, issues in Florida and around the country and all over. They still tend to be small, but gasoline cars don't catch on when they're just sitting. They catch fire when they're sitting in the garage. Usually, you have to be in a collision or something for that to occur. So it is a tough kind of a situation. We had an example here in Elk Grove this last summer. A guy was driving his Tesla. It started to shake. He pulled off the road and it burst into flames, and he didn't have time to get the child seats out of the back of his vehicle. He was really pleased his kids weren't along with him at the time.
Gosh.
We have our Vice President Kamala Harris, who's been gushing about electric buses for kids, and I can show you, God forbid, but I can show you a bunch of videos of electric buses that have ignited. There's one in China where adults are literally jumping out of this burning vehicle through the door trying to get away. And I tell my kids, don't put our grandkids on electric buses if you can avoid it. I don't want to see that to occur. So these things are something we need to work out over time with. And by the way, you know what the biggest source of fires in New York City is now?
No idea.
Lithium-ion battery chargers on those little scooters.
Electric scooters. You're right. I don't know. Maybe we talked about that before, but
I forgot.
They have they're getting like 200 of those a year, and that's a bigger source of fire than smoking or cooking or anything else. And again, I've told my landlord, don't bring any. We rent a property in Virginia Beach. Don't let any tenants bring electric bikes and park them inside. We don't need that.
But, speaking of that, the batteries and stuff, particularly like conventional batteries, give off hydrogen gas, and that's been a known explosion hazard for years. I'm just curious, is anybody looking at, the other beside electric is hydrogen? They want to make hydrogen fueled trucks and airplanes and all kinds of stuff like that, and then they want to build a hydrogen infrastructure, but nobody's talking about the potential for disaster, when the thing blows up.
Yeah, I actually wrote an article about that a couple months ago about how governments are ignoring safety issues with green energy, and I talked about EVs, but also hydrogen. If you ever want to read something ugly, read the history of hydrogen airships. The world was trying to build these dirigibles from about 1905 to 1937 when the Hindenburg blew up. And there were literally dozens of these things that ignited and exploded, and many, many people killed. And then finally they abandoned them. They were using them for the gas inside the dirigible, not for fuel. But nevertheless, these things are a problem. The hydrogen ignites with very, very low levels of energy. And the flames, actually, you can't see them. They burn so cleanly, you can't even see the flame. And so people that work on hydrogen, have these detectors to detect them. But there's people that talk about running hydrogen lines to houses, and I'm thinking, my gosh, I don't think we really want this, or gas stations.
Well, I wanted to ask you too, Steve, were you political before you started researching all of this? And then how important is November, to you? Like John and I, we talk about this every week, that this is a crucial election for our country. And I think when it comes to climate change and going green, that not that Republicans don't want that. I want a great society with no pollution. But they always say we don't. But the election is just so, we're just too extreme right now on all of this. So are you political, and what does November mean to you?
Well, I try not to endorse anybody, but I try to be independent. But this is a very politically charged topic, of course, energy.
Right.
If you look at the expenditures that have been going on. During the Obama administration, we were spending about $15 billion in subsidies per year to wind, solar, biofuels, other things. In President Trump's first term, it went down to about $8 billion. I don't know. We'll see if he gets the second term, $8 billion a year. But under the Biden administration with the Inflation Reduction Act, we're talking $40 to $50 billion a year of money that is being shoveled to all these projects. Everything from carbon dioxide pipelines in Iowa and South Dakota, where many people are fighting them, to all these other offshore wind and all these other things that they're trying to put into place. And we're just doing foolish things that nobody would do without massive subsidies and without the fear of man-made warming. So we really need to get back into something that is common sense. And by the way, if the Republicans are off base on this and they say, well, we've got dangerous climate change, I go after them as well. We really need to get back to, as you say, reducing real pollutants, wastewater and real air pollutants, not carbon dioxide, and get rid of this whole green movement trying to get to net zero carbon dioxide by 2050.
Wow. John, did you have a final? John had a final question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you. Speaking of the politics side, I'm sure you probably saw the testimony by the cross-country skier expert that the Democrats brought in, and Senator John Kennedy filleted artfully.
Well, that was nutty. I mean, another thing is, again, all these things are against the actual data. Your listeners can go to a thing called the Rutgers University Global Snow Lab and see that snow extent, which is the amount of snow that's on the surface of the Earth. They use satellites to get this data. The snow extent in both North America and Northern Hemisphere has been increasing over the last 40 years in the fall and the winter. It's been declining in the spring, but overall, we've got just as much snow as we always had. So one guy who comes from Alaska and says we don't have enough snow in Alaska, those are not the statistics. He doesn't even know what's going on. And this stuff is spouted in the media like it's fact. We just live in a world of foolishness. And if you hear a story in the media about climate, most likely it is wrong or has many things wrong in it. So people should get my book, Green Breakdown. They should get the Mad World of Climatism. Their kids which is a great book for your children. Kids are being taught in school a very one-sided story, which is wrong about all this. They can go to my website, Steve Goreham, GOREHAM.com, and I'll send them a signed copy.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and this is why we keep having you back, Steve, because we've got to educate the masses, and thank you for fighting the fight, We appreciate it always. And don't take
Thank
my
you.
jeans. I'm not giving up jeans.
Oh, yeah, right.
I'd just be happy they'd get a dishwasher and wash dishes, you know.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks again. We've been joined by Steve Goreham, and his book is Green Breakdown, and it's on Amazon.com. So God bless. Have a good weekend. We'll be right back on Veronica Live.